And you were telling me you made a video.
Yeah, I made a little short video directing people to your channel, and then I made a video on a clip, 7 minutes long, from a guy that had the title, Why Not Everyone is Saved. And a woman asked what seemed to be a genuine question, why, what about all the people that never heard before Christ and after Christ? And he tried to answer the way to get saved, but he never answered directly whether these people burn in hell or not. And I was specifically watching and waiting for that to be answered, and he never actually directly answered
Right.
it,
So you were
unfortunately.
saying they were outside. What was it, like a park or a university or something? Or could you tell me?
I didn't know for sure, but it looked like it could have been like a university or something like that.
And the guy had a podium or he just had a Wi-Fi mic or something?
I don't think it showed his feet, but he had like a mic, and I think he was standing on something. But yeah, and then the lady had a mic, and she was asking questions, so it was all set up for this.
Huh. And there were a lot of people around outside.
There were a few in the background, that were standing and other people walking by, so that's why I think it was like at a some kind of school or something like
But
that.
but obviously this question like came out of the blue. She just it was a question on her mind, be it that she was an atheist or a person considering, or looking at what Christianity is and had what would seem to me to be a very common, if not 100%, a question that everyone would have. If they weren't familiar with the religion, so called, and knew about this doctrine of people going to hell and being tortured forever with no redeeming value, and with any kind of care about humanity at all, she might say, well, what about the people that have never even heard of Christ or never saw a Bible? And surely there's many of those people in the world.
I Yeah, I'd imagine that's a top question to start asking, what about hell? What about other people? What about all of them that have never heard? Because surely you can find out pretty quickly that throughout all history there's been many who've never heard. So is there anything for them? So maybe, who knows? Catholic, certain parts of the Catholics might have like purgatory to relieve that question a little bit, or I
Well,
don't think,
doesn't it? Yeah.
I
Yeah.
don't know,
It's
they don't
just as
have a,
bad. It's very nondescript. I did hear once that, oh, there was limbo too. Limbo's where you went, if you didn't go to purgatory and you didn't go to hell, you went to limbo. And then one day on the radio, I mean, like 15, 20 years ago, I heard this comment being made as though it was news, and I forget the exact word that they used, but it might as well have been that the Catholic Church has now disacknowledged. We no longer recognize this place called limbo, and this was something that was taught in grade schools, and I don't know how deep, but it was. I learned about it while I was in a Catholic grade school. Limbo, but
huh,
purgatory is not good. It's bad. I think you suffer enough there to then be worthy to go to heaven, which would be better than hell, where you go and there's no redeeming value and no chance for you ever to get out of it, and God's going to torture you forever.
in the middle of the earth, in the
Who?
center of the earth,
Yeah, well, I don't. The
or
Catholics.
somewhere.
Well, the Catholics. I can't recall them ever teaching or me hearing, although since it was never anything that I ever embraced or could believe, just the concept, I might not remember that they said it was someplace, like an actual direction or place. Of course, you get the impression that it's down as opposed to heaven, which is a really physical point of view of what we understand to be spirit, which is not physical. So, so this girl could very well have been looking at Christianity as a religion uh, living in the Western world and not being an atheist or not being able to believe that there's no creator, which might have been even more insane to her or just as crazy. And she comes up with this question that's a very legitimate question. And what happened? He beat around the bush, never really answered it.
Yeah, he never directly answered, yes, these people are. He tried to answer, well, I'll get to that, he said, and he got into, well, and Israel, the old covenant stuff. He said there was this way, through Abraham and all that, and then it kind of just veered off. He never actually answered her question directly. What
And who
happens to
would
these?
really want to? Oh, and
Oh no.
yeah, and as we were speaking, it's like I had that same impression too. Like out of both grade school and high school, my impression was that every single Christian denomination and group believed in a Trinity and a hell. And neither one of these could I believe, buy into. Never even really began the process of embracing the idea or making it my own. It was just resistance. This is crazy. Doesn't make any sense. I don't get it. I don't like it. I don't want it. I don't believe it. And never got past that. And so went in the direction of searching out every other religion and significant philosophy that typically stood the test of some historical period of time, which is the only sense I had to think and believe that, there must be something to it if people followed it and believed it that long. But, you know, coming into it as an adult and understanding that this doctrine, this belief is so prevalent across the board, what an obvious question that anybody would ask. You would think almost everybody would ask the question.
I think they, yeah, I think they do in their mind, even if they stay quiet about it. Even unbelievers probably at least have that question juggled through at least once, I would imagine.
Yeah, you don't hear of it being taught much. We never hear it anymore today. I think it's referred to as something from the past that would be like old school, and they define it or refer to it as fire and brimstone preaching,
Yeah,
where they're professing and preaching and teaching and pushing hell as something, you best fear. So you'd better get with the right program and believe. Whether or not you want to believe, can believe, or not, just start out by saying that you do, because you don't want to start out saying that you want to go to hell.
yeah. I mean, it's definitely still being preached, but yeah, I think it's maybe to a lesser, less obvious, less often, maybe, right? And they might change the words a little bit instead of saying, like darkness or something into eternal darkness or whatever, soften it up a little bit.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
don't know.
Well, in Christianity as a whole, especially the mega churches or bigger ones, more successful, where a lot of people can go and have a good time with free coffee. They,
Yeah, they don't even,
yeah, they teach positive thinking message.
yeah, they don't even bring that up probably.
No, no. And you ask them and they absolutely believe it. The
Now
last
I got,
time, go ahead.
oh no, go ahead because I had a question next.
Oh, okay. But well, this is off topic though. Um, the last time I was in one of those buildings, I brought up the verse in Ecclesiastes, which says that, God created all things, God created evil. And the guy insisted that it wasn't in there. It's not in the Bible. And that's all I had to say. It just came to mind. It seemed rather awkward that, well, look, what was he left with other than to just simply call me a liar? I'm misinformed and it's wrong. And he's right. He's never seen it and he doesn't believe it. And that was the end of that. I said, let's go look at, and I didn't have a Bible on me. Let's go get a, no, he didn't want to do, he's too busy.
Yeah, it's like Isaiah 9 or something. Who knows? It's close to that. It's like,
And what,
here, read it.
then what were you just going to say, Ryan? You said you, Started.
Oh,
You had a question?
do you think the church world will ever teach, purposely not just stay kind of quiet like the mega churches, but actually teach no hell, no burning forever? Do you think that's going to change?
No,
No?
no, because tradition is tradition. It's been set in place. It's what tradition is. It's been historically a significant primary doctrine to the so-called Christian religion. It's integral to what Christianity is ever since it was first brought up and taught and believed. And that goes way back. No, I only see things getting worse and worse, and maintaining a teaching about the hell doctrine. One of the best ways to keep people from ever understanding who God is and or receiving anything from God, because certainly God's not sharing, increasing, or maturing anyone who's out to profess that God will torture a vast majority of humanity forever with fire with no redeeming value. They're just on their own. They just would rather say, I'm Christian. And it's easy. It's easy for the doctrine to stay put. And what? Every major denomination would have to write it out of their doctrine. They'd all be admitting that they were lying. How are they going to do that? That's part of why I don't see it ever changing. How could they? They'd all have to dramatically change. What would they? Getting rid of limbo is one thing that only the Catholics had. And it was kind of like this place you didn't need to speak much about because you just hung out there for a while because you couldn't come right into heaven. Purgatory, you had to pay and get tortured a little bit, I do believe. I think they might have gotten rid of purgatory too.
I think so,
They've
for the
just
most part.
acknowledged it. We no longer acknowledge its existence.
Yeah,
We
so it's gone.
Yeah, so it's gone. Yeah,
We
we
don't.
used to teach it. It's in plenty of our old books. We've got a lot of writings about purgatory, but we decided it doesn't really exist. Or we don't need to deal with it. I don't know. But if a person doesn't believe in atheism, what are you left with? Judaism, Hinduism, Buddhism, being a Muslim? And then in the Western world, if you live in Europe or Americas, that's the thing to be. That's where you're going to get the most acceptance. That's where there's a church building on
Every corner,
at
yeah.
nearly every corner in America. That's right. And so if you want to be seen and known as a good person, and you're going to become religious or be involved in a religion and have some position on God, the obvious choice to go along, get along, and to fit in is to say, I'm a Christian. And it's as easy as that. And that's
Yeah.
about as far as a person can ever get. And what stands in the way, at least in part, is the Christian organization. All the denominations themselves are standing between God and anybody that has an inclination to know and understand God and Christ. And there it is, the business of religion standing between God and people, telling them, you really can't believe this. We're stuck with it because we got involved, and now I've been to school. I'm a certified pastor, teacher. I'm in the business of religion now, any one of the denominations. My wife and my family depends on the income we get there. We can't just rebel and stand up and say that, okay, there's no hell now. And the entire organization's not going to do it. It'd be like they were no longer what they've always been. What organization does that? Not even in business. For the people that were in the train business, what business were they really in, right? Transporting people. That was the service the train business provided. But they resisted cars. The train people never got in the car business. They stuck with the train business. It was the tradition. It's what they've always known to work. It's what everyone preferred. And there were all the difficulties and challenges of bringing up a whole new industry and a whole new way to travel. Well, if you go over 50 miles an hour, your heart will burst. There might, been thoughts like that out there. And the train people were comfortable in what they had transporting people by train. So they went out of business. And the car people showed up to take over the entire world of transporting people around. No different in the business of religion.
It's funny. It's the first time you mentioned train. The train honked its horn like 1 or 2 seconds within that time you said that.
Things like
It's,
that happen. It's
yeah.
funny. Something happened just today. Hold on a minute, Ryan. I got to get this paper. It came in the mail. I forget what it was that was going on at the moment when I found it in the mail. But it was, but when I opened it up and looked at it, the this little article that was written was taking the exact same position as one that I was actually considering at that very moment, and it was about Calvin and how many people associate themselves with Calvin or Calvinistic doctrine, when in fact Calvin uh, tortured a good number of people, sent them to
Yeah.
jail and killed them, and
Yeah.
burnt this one famous guy,
On a
burnt him to death.
stake. Yeah.
Yeah,
And he used, if I'm getting the right guy, he used some kind of whatever he used that burns. It burns a lot slower, I believe, so that the pain was higher on
well
that
that's
guy.
yeah,
I think it was Calvin. And it was because it's just it's what I read, and I do believe it's true because it's not shocking, especially back in the 1500s, where you might be able to get away with this a little easier than now. Just post up a stake, and with the church, the mother church being more dominant and more in control and all
sure,
that stuff. But
hand in hand with the
there
government, actually.
the guy that he put on the stake just didn't like something, and he wrote a letter to him or something about, I think it was like Trinity or something, and I think the guy might have been onto a good truth, and Calvin just didn't like it, so he burned him on the stake, something like that. He just didn't like it because it was going against his doctrine and stuff, and his you know beliefs and whatnot. So that was the cause, the reason, from what I understand and know.
Okay, here it is. In speaking about Luther's murderous and hate-filled spirit was the fruit of his own teaching. He vainly imagined, and quote, no sin can separate us from him, even if we were to kill or commit adultery thousands of times per day. This thinking and this man were enemies of the gospel Jesus preached. Tragically, and Calvin ordered the torture and death of many who opposed him, singularly Michael Servetus,
Okay, that sounds familiar.
who was burned alive. These men who are guilty of monstrous deeds are still hailed by the church as heroes.
You got this.
This alone should cause someone to shudder.
Yeah, you got that in your mail.
Yeah, it came in the mail. It's something I signed up for once.
Oh, okay.
And it's free. And I, my thought today actually was to call him and say, you need not send me it anymore. Called Focus on the Kingdom.
Okay.
Yeah, and that's the group's name. Focus on the Kingdom.
Hmm.
So I forget what I was thinking about though, and then this came, and here's something being written about exactly what I was thinking of in the moment. Regarding these doctrines that Christianity has that have become really more or less synonymous with what Christianity is. You can't get rid of hell and still have Christianity today. It'd be
No.
gone.
Yeah, and without
No. They'd be
without
like saying, we've been lying all the time. We don't know anything about what we're talking about. And every place that we said that hell is referred to in the Bible, well, that's something else now. It can't be done. Not in
no,
this world.
no, nope. Jesus spoke more on hell than heaven, says the old saying goes. Count, countless times they've said that for ages.
Well, there has to be something different and unique, and certainly, especially there is for those who, especially those who believe, will be in that first resurrection. And there has to be some clear and absolute, let alone dramatic distinction between those who are simply carnal, so called Christians, and people that are really seeking a relationship with God in Christ and the truth out of God's love, that we become such one and the same with Christ. What happened to love your enemies? And these guys are burning people and torture them, and yet
Oh yeah,
Christianity exalts them. They still do today.
I've read quotes from, it may have been Calvin, or it probably wasn't Calvin, but someone even before him, that if you don't do things like this, you're actually not living according to God's standard and becoming like God. Because if you don't, oh, it was just the way it was put. I wish I had it. It's just so um, evil, but it's the way it's said. It's just uses the Bible and some words, and the way it's structured, just classic. Just if you don't do this thing, you're actually the bad guy. If you don't snuff out evil, you're the bad guy, basically. In short, to so a Christian should be doing this according to some of the writings in the past in the church
Well, and
is
like
to
you said,
destroy your enemies, you
and
know.
what you were talking about today that you saw, we both understood that that girl just walked away like, well, you
Yeah.
don't even have an answer for me, and it was a serious question. I needed an answer for it. It makes a lot of sense to ask that question. So, what's that guy doing? I mean, how
Well,
how much more clear could it be that he chased her away from God and Christ?
exactly. But at the end of the video, he's back in his studio thing because he's got some nice setup or whatever, and I think he's pretty known, at least to some degree. He's definitely popular. The channel Wretched or whatever in Wretched Studio, but
Okay, so they're in the business of religion. That's clear.
oh, they're in business
Yeah.
for sure. He gave a comparison with like Bill Gates giving $1 million to 10 people at the mall, and then why not? Then people saying, well, why not give everyone $1 million? And then he connects that to God. God doesn't have to. And the way he talks to just seems, I have a hard time believing that he's not adding to his voice a lot and faking some of it. But if it is how he talks, that's fine. It just the way he does it, it just comes across as artificial. That God doesn't have to do anything. And and then he goes, and his video finishes with, but his mercy is magnificent and great, or something like that, and then it cuts off. So in his mind, oh, he was great. He answered the question. She's the one at fault. She's the one that doesn't understand. She walked away because she's evil or whatever. But it's actually flipped. He actually
Yeah.
chased her away. Period. Done.
Well, I mean,
He
how much more could he be antichrist? I
he
mean,
just
even
chased
in
her
the
away from
beginning,
knowing Christ. Yeah.
there were many antichrist things that are to wane wax worse and worse. And now there are many, many more antichrist today. And how much more antichrist can you be other than to say, okay, Christ has a father who tortures the vast majority of humanity forever with no redeeming value?
I mean,
So
that's
everybody can have their revenge through God. What kind of love is this? What kind of God is this?
yeah, that's the whole point of part of the kingdom is, compel them to come in, and he just chased them away from knowing who God is. Chased her away, and now it's probably unlikely that she will even want to ask anybody, any other Christian teacher, questions anymore.
A
I mean,
lot
it's
less
possible.
likely. than she was that in that
Yeah,
moment when
less
she was
so,
inspired to do it.
at least less so to lesser degree. And then what? There's no foundation. You're just on shaky ground going
Well,
from a little bit of Christianity, a little bit of Buddhism, a little bit of Hinduism, maybe, just try to be
oh,
nice.
whatever sounds good.
It's your own works now, and now you have nothing to stand on, and you're just trying to be a good person according to your own knowledge and ways of, you know,
Well, and that's what it appears he's doing. He doesn't even answer the question.
no.
That's a big sign in itself. So
Yeah,
you're
that,
just really agreeing with me, and you don't have any answer to answer the heart from which this question comes, which is just a simple care about people.
yeah, and
And
yeah, he did admit, when she asked that question, he's like, yep, yeah, I get it. And, he's like, that is a tough question or a hard question or something like that. And then he went off about how it is you get saved through God's, but that's not answering the question. He went around some different route on how people could be saved. And in the video, I really went off on how Gentiles could not be saved during the old covenant times, how that there was just battle between them, that they couldn't become heirs of God in the old kingdom or anything. Otherwise, there was no purpose or value of Paul preaching to the Gentiles of prophecies in the Old Testament saying that the Gentiles are going to come in. There's specific prophecies of Gentiles being saved in the future at some point, and that context is the new covenant. So, I made the point where there is no point of those prophecies if it was already happening. It wasn't happening. It was just war. They hated each other. There might have been some strangers converted, but they were called strangers, not children of God. So it's just crazy. So he said that was the old kingdom evangelism. And it's not. It wasn't. There was no evangelism like how he was saying. Like anybody could be saved, and he said everybody would want to know and come to God through Israel. I'm like, really? When did that happen? Show me through the Bible when that happened, when the whole world wanted to know who God is and keep his commandments. I'd say the opposite happened. But
well, it works for us. All
it's
things work
crazy.
together for good for those whom God's given to understand God and thereby understand the love through which God loves us first, so that we can then love God in return. Hey, it works to show how special we are, how God's made us so simply and clearly special to grow and understand God's loving truth relative to these insane, crazy doctrines of confusion,
Yeah,
lies, delusion, deceit. It makes it pretty quite clear that there's a special group,
there's a special,
especially those that believe. All be saved,
but especially,
especially the believers,
exactly.
especially those who believe, which are those that God's chosen to believe and reveal to them a truth that further leads a person to the faith of Christ, not just to believe. I believe, yeah, I have faith. No, you don't. It's not your
Yeah, and
faith, it's the faith of Christ. It's a gift. As much as spirit is a gift, so is the faith, so is the understanding, so is everything.
I bring it up before, Paul in like Romans 9 talks about a little bit about why, and a little bit about that like mystery, and it is exactly what you said to show his special side, if you will, the mercy and his judgments, which is the judgments that Christianity doesn't understand, is you getting what you put out, you reaping what you sow, and living without God, a lost life, to show you that you're nothing without God, and that's for the many, then the majority, and then the few come to that understanding, and God is sovereign. That's what Romans 9 really hits hard on God's sovereignty.
That's the bottom line, really.
And nobody
Who's
like,
truly is God truly sovereign? They'll all say, all so-called people that claim the name of Christ, calling themselves Christians, will say God is sovereign, and not one of them believes it. Not a single one. It's all of what they do and what they choose. God doesn't choose them, they chose God. And so, since they made the right choice by what they know that everybody else should know, they made the right choice. So, they're good and the other people are bad. Ready made judgment, set up to believe that one's own judgment is righteous by starting out with a lying, deceiving doctrine that
Yeah.
they chose God. And they were taught that. Again, by who? The Antichrist leaders of the Christian harlot church. Well, Ryan, I'm off to dinner.
All right, we're at a half hour, so that was plenty.
Okay, perfect. We'll speak.
All right,
All right, later.
later.